Okay, we're live. Okay, so welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this week's edition of Leaders Insight. I'm really pleased and really honoured to be joined by a good friend of mine and our recent weekly Wellbeing guest in the main man himself, Paul Valentine from Spire Tech Group. How are you, Paul?
Hi, buddy. How's it going, buddy?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. Apologies to the guys. There was some tech issues from my headset moving into my meeting room, hence why I'm looking like a 1970s DJ. Welcome, guys. We normally do this on a Monday. We moved it to a Tuesday today. We've been moving the scheduling around to kind of suit some requests from a number of our viewers. So weekly Wellbeing is our Friday session, which may be moved, but the Leaders Insight is the start of the week. What this is all about is really the essence of IsoNation and why it was created. A collective, a shared collective, creating support at a time of need for organizations, sharing evolving strategies, best practice, and really partnering and collaborating to co-navigate the changing landscape, which is changing by the week. And we'll talk a little bit more about what Boris has said today, which kind of releases a few more things and allows the landscape to look like we can move through it a little bit easier. So what I'd like to say first of all is to make sure we've got anyone that's commenting. Feel free to comment, guys. We'll review the questions. Any questions for me or Paul, we'll answer those during the debate. And what I want to start with, Valley, is the OMG moment. We always ask this at the start of our Leaders Insight. The moment where it was really apparent that this COVID-19 was going to be here to stay. Mine was a Cheltenham moment. And what was yours, particularly from a personal perspective and from a Spire perspective as well?
From a work perspective, we received service calls for different sort of, as what we call adds, moves and changes. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of a steady over, every day and week that goes by. However, I'd say sort of March the 21st, 22nd, the amount of calls being received for can you set up diverts, can you put calls coming through to colleagues was tenfold. That was we had to deal with that straight away and quickly, so those clients could continue taking and receiving calls. From a personal perspective, I think it was the announcement where the pubs were closing, and I have never seen the supermarket so full and the beer aisle actually empty so quickly than ever before. So that was possibly the realization. But obviously, that's joking aside. Obviously more serious.
Well, listen, if you've got no beer in your house and you drink beer and you work really hard and you like to unwind and have a beer, that's serious for some people.
Absolutely right.
And it's so funny because when we ask people's OMG moments, they always generally revolve around something quite social. And I think the whole lockdown or the whole change was the restriction to movement and the restriction to doing stuff that we need to do. There's two things really. There's work, the stuff we do with work, and the stuff that we do social. So they are inextricably linked to some degree. Yeah. And yours would have been different to other people because as in recruitment, we're hearing, the COVID-19 things affecting certain sectors, certain organizations. With you, it would have been affecting everyone. So you wouldn't have been looking at certain pockets saying, well, is this isolated or is this mainstream? Actually, the fact that most of your client base was calling you up and requesting additional telephony support meant that there was a real issue. And in terms of the business, so before we talk a little bit more about how you as Spire reacted, tell the viewers at home, the guys who didn't see the first weekly Wellbeing, a little bit about your business, your origins, and kind of what you do, Paul.
Okay, thanks, Nick. We're a telecoms business in its own right, and providing really sort of.
We've lost Paul there. We got a bit of a technical hitch. That's all right.
Yeah, cool. So we're a telecoms outfit, really sort of simplifying telephony and connectivity for businesses of all sizes. So sort of demystifying the technical jargon of telephony. So the other services that we provide are Sage CRM, so slightly different client base, but concentrating on companies that are using the Sage CRM platform and integrating the two, which works very well. So core is telephony, telephone systems for office, and high-speed internet connectivity, which is very important at the moment.
Excellent. And in terms of the growth, I know you've added another addition. We had some technical issues there, so sorry I dropped out briefly. What is your business? Because you've morphed really and changed. What have you changed from to?
Yeah, so typically it's been a telephony business where we're providing, as I said, telephone systems, but also once you've built up a client base that trust and believe in your services, they're getting busier, their customers are getting less patient, and they require a faster response. So what we find is that, can you do this, which is mobility, workforce, can you do other services, as long as it's built on one platform and it's accurate billing, and there's somebody at the end, as a human voice at the end of the phone. That's what business is like, and that's where we pick up a lot of clients, where it's typically one service initially, but over a period of time, it's 4/5 services. So we become their sort of in-house comms IT business for them.
Okay, excellent. And I know from personal experience, because obviously I've been working with you for a number of years, how important that remote connectivity will be. But we'll talk about that a little bit later in the series. I know you've been able to, I suppose you've been the lifeline behind a number of organisations creating that level of business continuity, remaining connected. And also we'll talk a little bit more about changing mindsets and mind shifts around remote working. But before we go on to that, COVID's here, your clients are ringing you up, they're telling you that they require some additional support. That's them. In terms of your own business, what was the initial reaction to it, and what were the precautionary measures you took that took place from a Spire tech group perspective?
Yeah, we consider ourselves a distributed, or what's been termed now as a distributed business anyway. So typically not one that is ideally in one office, because we can cater for different parts of the country. We have to have skill sets and engineering resource in those areas. So what we found is that we've been doing this for a number of years already. So our communication internally is all remote. So we're able to deploy very quickly. So it was, to say, business as usual for ourselves. It's what we promote and sell ourselves. And therefore, obviously, we have to try it and trial it over a period of time. So there was no disruption other than the volume of calls coming through at any one time. And because we have our own CRM system, it worked quite well. So yeah, very fortunate. So processes for us was key, which is obviously what the business is built on. Mm-hmm.
I love that. And when you talked about, because when I'm recruiting for certain organisations, we talk about stress testing, and a lot of organisations, particularly in data recovery, they talk about. So do you remember when I was involved in the Heathrow debacle, the IT debacle, and I was planning to go and see my cousin's wedding, and I was stuck in Heathrow for 2 days, and all the flights were cancelled for 3 days. I've recruited for people that deal with those scenarios. How do you stress test your business to make sure? How do you make it corona-proof, supposedly, essentially?
Yeah. So it's I suppose hope for the best, plan for the worst scenario. So we always work on a contingency. So putting that into practice when we go and consult with a client. This industry is typically price driven, and it's the cheap. It's a race to the bottom, and it's really an interesting scenario, because it's quite technical in terms of different terminology for different things, and several different names for the same item. So from a client's buying perspective, it becomes very difficult. So there's almost sort of what we notice, almost like a mist that comes over, and therefore it can lend itself to being price driven. Now that's quite dangerous when you're talking about resilience, because when it becomes price driven, you're probably going to buy a solution that is going to fit for you now, However, it may not fit when you've got situations like COVID-19. So what we've done over the years, way 5-6 years ago, is always work on a contingency basis. So in practice, that means putting the primary circuit in, for example, but also asking us questions about what if. What if this happened? What if there's snow? What if there's a power fault? How are you going to survive? How much does that call cost you to a client coming through? And could your business survive if it was down for an hour or a day or whatever? And what typically comes back then is, no, it can't survive, or this is going to be the commercial impact of the business. Therefore, it opens up then more conversations to providing a backup solution. That has to be key now in anyone's minds just going through C19, is, how do we cope to operate both in a central office but also with a distributed workforce as well.
You know what? It's so, and I've been through a similar process with yourself and with other suppliers in my supply chain around, okay, so, because everyone does that, doesn't they? Everyone makes a comparison when they're looking at a service based on cost. And actually, there are a hell of a lot of people who would have made some really poor decisions, or some market decisions around pricing for supply chain that hasn't enabled them to. There's not many scenarios you can predict like this, but actually haven't been on the right side of working with a provider like that. Going on to and leading on nicely, in terms of remote working, what proportion of your clients before COVID-19 operated remote working? Because obviously I've had remote working ever since we've been open. As a recruiter, we're at the office, we're in the office. There's no set times you need to be in the office apart from team meetings. You run your own diary, and from a connectivity perspective, you need to make sure that they're able to do that. What's the split like amongst the rest of your business?
Yeah, I think the systems that we've put out have always had that facility of remote working or agile working, in terms of bringing the calls to either the desk phone or a mobile client or a desk phone, depending on where you are. So the technology has always been there. I would say that 60% of it has been adopted on inception of that project. What we're seeing now is that it's completely turned. So whereas the desk phone was typically the driver and how nice that looked and the rest of it, it's less important. It's how can I get calls on a specific Android device or an iOS iPhone through to different types of PC or laptop. So it seems to be people are adopting that the desk environment isn't the prerequisite.
And what do you think is going to happen moving forward?
Yeah, I think there's no thinking about it. It's happening now. So the amount of calls that we received on a daily basis now, looking for, well, first of all, it tends to be, can we adapt our current infrastructure, which is generally the case, up to a certain size and age, through to what is the cost to deploy a fully remote working scenario based on our employees not coming back into the office on a 5-day-a-week basis, but coming on a gradual basis for team meetings and so forth. The other interesting point that we're picking up now is, typically remote working's been around for a while, but you've been tended to share your broadband at home. Now what we're seeing is that you've potentially got 2 people working from home, and also you've got children sharing that same broadband connection. Multiply that by the other people in the street postcode sharing the same already congested network. Yeah. So problems. I have to say though that the networks generally across the UK have performed very well, and they've done a sterling job in most areas. But what we're finding now is that people or businesses that are getting their remote workers ready for remote working are tending to look at a more dedicated connection, or perhaps either, depending on budget, looking at a standalone work connection, another broadband that is specifically for that business, or better still, looking for something such as what we call a fiber to the premises, which is effectively almost a baby lease line. Okay. Very cost efficient. Obviously, it's the networks are jumping onto this now, so very cost attractive, and it provides then a dedicated connection. And the key thing here as well is it provides a service level guarantee, a service level agreement. So nothing's infallible in this sector. When things do go wrong, at least the business can have some reassurance that it will be up and running within 6 to 7 hours.
I love it. And without plugging you on this one, how cheap is that in comparison? Because the other day I was on my Peloton in the morning, on Tuesday morning last week, and I was like, how come I've got no connectivity? And I ran around the house and I've got 4 computers. I turned 3 computers off. There were 3 iPads lying around. You don't realize how much it draws your broadband. How cheap is that option?
Yeah, 2 different options, but going the days back in sort of 2000, 2001, we were putting projects together where a 1 meg connection was £16,000 a year. So it's come down significantly now, depending on the postcode area, depending on what network infrastructures in your immediate area. You could be picking up some lease line prices for just over £100, £120 per month, which just to a lot of people it's a big jump from a broadband connection. But when you're let's say on a call, or you're working with projects, you need consistency. And really, if you break that difference down of £60-70 a month into days, it's negligible, really.
Right, continuity is king at the moment.
Yeah, and as that technology is being more adapted more, then obviously the prices will be driven down. Just a point, actually, a bit of a key, actually, to any listeners out there. There are still some vouchers available, specifically if you live in the rural communities, where you can get up to £2,500 for the cost of installation. Fantastic. That's all government backed as well. So £2,500, and you can all club together as well. So if you're in a rural estate of 30, 40 houses, use all that money, and then you can bring in a nice, fresh, very fast lease line without the buffering.
I love that. Is that something anyone could find on your website, or is that something worthwhile getting in touch with you?
Yeah, Department of Culture and Media department has all the available now. So this is specifically for the rural sector. The business one has the first or second tranche has run out recently, but there is talk of bringing another pot of money specifically for the business sector, suburban business sector as well.
I love it. Just before we carry on, I wanted to have some shouts out there. Big shout to Bethany, Rachel, Christian. Good to see you guys again, and Mark. And then we've got Gory, Chris Gores on again, saying afternoon, fellas. Joking apart, he's made a really nice point there. He said it's a great opportunity to be able to address the work-life balance. He said we've gone from 90% of over 80 staff being 100% office-based to those same people only now having to attend the office 2 days a week. We'll talk about it now because it's a really great point. As a recruiter, I've spoke to some really archetypal, stoic line managers and business owners around flexible working and remote working. Let's talk about remote working, which is different to flexible working. And a lot of people had this mindset that you had to be present in the office to be effective. You have to have the presence. I understand that to some degree when you're leading teams, and each sector's different. But what's your take on this shift, as Chris Gores just mentioned there?
Yeah, it's a really good point, and I think it's going to be a lot of trial. You know, if you think about some traditional businesses where the workforce has generally come in on a Monday to Friday, there's going to be a lot of trust on both parts as people work from home. I think a couple of key things that we're seeing and talking to clients is, make sure the technology is there, but also make sure the basics in terms of maybe a routine checks, team meetings. I don't think that the management processes will be there in place as much initially. So to making sure that the checks and balances are there with your client. I think the other thing as well is the interpersonal side of it. Whereas if you were sat, let's say, a colleague and they're having a real crap day, you'd know they're having a difficult day, and you would communicate in a specific way. Now you relay that into a remote working scenario, and specifically new remote workers. You've got to learn a new type of language. So because you can't see that person maybe having a difficult day, you have to perhaps tone your emails slightly different. So there's a huge learning curve now coming through. That's what we see, and I think that the importance of video conferencing and reliable video conferencing will be key to help break and help enhance those interpersonal skills.
Yeah, I agree. Listen, we could talk about this. You know, I've got my other business connected employee engagement, and the teams which have had highly engaged historic workforces haven't struggled during the furlough period because they've been well communicated. They're really tight. Their channels of communication and operation have been really slick, and they've had that level of autonomy. They've had that voice, and so when it's a difficult situation, or when we're in the pandemic that we're in right now, actually it's easy. It's when you've had those fragmented teams, or the teams are new, or where people aren't really that tight. As soon as you create that division, which lockdown is, it just kind of escalates all of the smaller bits, and they just kind of are magnified. So that's one element in terms of team and culture, historic team and culture. I suppose in terms of trust, as you mentioned there, organizations have had to trust people, and actually they've realized that they've been more productive. I think the big thing that we've heard when we speak to a lot of people is not having to commute. So people are more productive, and they're willing to work a little bit long because they think, well, normally I'd have spent an hour there and an hour back. I've got 2 hours left. I don't even mind doing that an extra hour a day or an extra 2 hours because I'm doing it in the safety of my own house. The kids might be running through back into the day, not in core hours. And so that has changed. And I think the big thing there that Gory said was the opportunity to be able to address work-life balance. Everyone's now got a new perspective. So it's no longer just the business leaders at the top saying, well, actually, we're going to change our mindset. Employees and people in the business are saying, you know what, we need to change things. We're pushing up and saying, just because lockdown's been released, or just because we're allowed back in the office, is there anything we can do to review our current practices? And I think it's going to be a lifelong debate. I think the first thing anybody's going to want, Paul, is that everybody comes back and has a bit of unity, and everybody's able to see each other and give each other a hug if you want, or high five, or just have that contact, because that's one thing we've been devoid of. Then after that, I think as it levels out, there'll be a bit of a shift. In terms of we're kind of like in a semi-evolutionary state really at the moment. Things now seem to be moving rapidly. We've had chat from Boris today around potentially opening pubs up again, potentially lowering the 2 meter to 1 meter, potentially allowing families to go into larger numbers and of people to go into other people's homes. So we're starting to see the R numbers coming down, and we're moving on the right track. What are you seeing in terms of businesses coming back to work? From a Spire perspective, how has that changed? Because I know there hasn't been a great deal of change to personnel. How's that changed for you now?
Okay, so we can see, I suppose on a daily basis, just by the volume of calls that are coming through the stats, that there was a marked change, probably sort of mid-May, where it wasn't far off. The stats of incoming and outbound calls were probably not far off mid-March, which was a good sign to us. That then was followed through by calls about what you can do or what can we do in terms of using deploying our existing technology differently, and what do we need to get ready for a different way of working. So that was noticeable for us a couple of weeks ago, and that is just continuing now. More questions, more inquiries, and what we're doing is we've I suppose realised that we have to step up. We've got to work differently as well. Whereas we've always, to a certain extent, been successful with existing clients and people that have kindly recommended us, we need to step this up now. So we will be talking about a new marketing position, specifically concentrating on remote working and technologies, including software around the new workplace. So that's something that we're doing this week, coupled with some marketing that we've been doing in specific areas around the country.
I love that. It's really interesting actually, because whether you're a business owner or a business leader or an employee in a business, everyone's been affected. This is global. There's no one that's been unaffected. Even organisations that have benefited from this, they've still been affected, even there's been an upturn. Yeah. The one consistent message that we're hearing at the moment is that organizations that have buried their head in the sand while this has been going on and not looked at what the new normal will look like, hasn't looked at what their value proposition was before, what their customer needs are, what those gains could be, what the pains are. There's going to be a true disconnect, because anyone that just thought they've just put their business on pause and this has all happened in the background and they've had cash, or they've been able to furlough, or they've been able to put things in status and then think they can press play again, it's going to be a real rude awakening for people, because the landscape has changed, requirements have changed. It might be similar, but things have changed. And I think the biggest thing, and the guys at Nifty Communications, we spoke about this recently actually, because they're going through, they're speaking to organizations that are going through a whole host of changes, and they're talking to people about communication strategies. Ultimately, the narrative's changed, because the story that we had before, and your story's changed. You're going to have the same systems and processes you had before, but they're going to resonate with different people. So actually, the fact that you're making sure your marketing collateral mirrors this, and the fact that you're putting a bum on a seat at a new employee to kind of make sure you're cornering that market, that's what we're finding at the moment with everyone else. And I really implore any business owner that's not changed anything at all to really just get with the program. There's still time, because it's going to take another 6 to 12 weeks before we go back to any kind of lockdown really finishing, because things will change and the narrative's got to change. Your marketing message got to change. Your communication methods might change. You might have to use social media. You never used social media before. What made you? Because obviously it's a tough time right now for business. What made you say, well, we're gonna put our money where our mouth is, and we're going to create this role?
Two things really. There was an ongoing project that we're running with some very fast connectivity down in specific areas of Bristol and down in Park Royal, London, which is just about to launch. And that required some really process marketing. Now, we've enjoyed marketing ourselves, but with everything else going on, we felt that we could do it justice, do a proper job, really. Mm-hmm. And because the competition was undoubtedly going to be enhanced as well, we needed to get it right, because there's only sort of one chance that we've got to, as everything is changing, to get it right. So we took advantage of making sure our systems and revenues were in place, and then we're able to focus that head time in terms of, okay, what do we need now to do to take us into a position over the next year to 2 years' time. So that was it. It wasn't really a difficult position, because we knew that we couldn't do a proper job ourselves, focused with the right experience, the right marketing experience.
Okay. And so that the decision was then to kind of, instead of outsource it, bring that knowledge transfer internal.
Yeah, we've tried various things, and we still use different marketing companies for different specific campaigns, which works okay. But we needed someone to manage it, where they're responsible for it in house, they own it, and they live and breathe it. Whereas it's across all sectors, so social media, web development, and also the metrics that go with it. Otherwise, tweets are important, but what they actually mean in terms of turning into opportunities and making sure the existing clients are happy. So it needs to be meaning information, and to do that, you have to dedicate time and obviously a resource and money that needs to go into that. No. So that's something that we're looking at right now. Okay,
and it's great. I don't want to give a shameless plug to Nifty, but Nifty. I'm working with Nifty, and from a comms perspective, they are tip top. And you know what? I think, as you said before, there's one thing knowing how to do it, and there's another thing doing it. And it's not that you don't necessarily have the skills in house. It's actually having the time, because it's one of those things that you just can't dedicate. To dedicate the time properly, it's got to be someone's job. Well, I'm really pleased. I'm really pleased that you've put that put the marker down, and I look forward to finding out how that all kind of pans itself out, really. I suppose with IsoNation, what we're planning to do is, once lockdown finishes, we'll do some catch-up, smaller versions of the Leaders Insight to find out how, not to hold anyone to ransom on their moment of putting their hands on the bowl and deciding what it's going to be like. But actually, we know what it's like as a business leader. We're all about making informed assumptions about what the future will hold. This one's just a bit of a tougher decision-making process, but it'd be really interesting to find out what everyone's put into plan, how that's kind of panned out. But going back to culture and dynamics, in terms of your business, I know you're a lean business. What benefits have you seen to the culture? Because we've heard lots of conversations, and we've had lots of conversations with people and heard lots of responses around actually going through this kind of situation drives people closer and creates a stronger bond. From a Spire perspective, how have you found it?
Yeah, because we're working remotely. We're talking on a regular basis, as we usually do anyway. Colleagues live not necessarily in Worcester, in Bristol. A couple of colleagues live in Worcester, but we're still obviously talking on a regular basis on video conferencing or mobile. So the culture, I suppose, from the onset, we said, and I may have touched on this a couple of weeks ago, is that we wanted to come out of this from a positive experience. Mm-hmm. I remember speaking to Darren about, even though if the customers are managed, we need to come out of this reflecting back with a positive outcome, whether that be sort of a home improvements project or something else, learning an instrument or whatever. You need to reflect back at it. So that I'd say we've got the culture right. We're talking. It's always been busy. Just a different four walls, essentially. In touch with clients, finding out how they're working, how they are. Once the lockdown was relaxed slightly to 2 and 4 balls, we were enjoying a bit of golf with a couple of clients. So, which was very fortunate. It's been for us. It's been a positive experience, which I'm very, very, very thankful for.
Fair play. And when it comes to strong cultures, it comes from leadership. So that will have come from you and Darren. You're not autocratic. You leave you guys to do it. Well. Yeah. And so you've got to take some props for that. You'd be incredibly proud of you guys. I know you are, but you've got to take some credit for that. What changes would you say you've made that you're going to carry on moving forwards?
Okay, so one thing that we are focused on is, even though we are, as I said numerous times, spread out, we've realised that you still need now to bring into one central location. So we're looking at a central location in Worcestershire, obviously retaining what we currently have, but enhancing that where we can all meet on a regular basis, go through the touch points we need to do, what's working, what isn't, on a defined date. So it keeps that communication, that interpersonal communication, even better than it was. That's one thing that we've taken out of this. So we're actually looking at places tomorrow, as it happens.
Wicked. I love that. And in terms of, I suppose the future, what will you do when lockdown officially ends?
Yeah, I've missed the concerts that have been cancelled. Two concerts that were cancelled, which is a shame. Sport, obviously, missing the back end of the rugby at Warriors, which I missed greatly.
Hopefully soon, mate. Hopefully we'll be back in the box soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's going to be interesting times for the guys there. Generally mixing with socialising with friends and family, just getting that back to as it was. I suppose not taking it for granted, using the time with choice friends a little bit more wisely than perhaps just before, making it more of a special occasion. That's what I'm coming to.
Yeah, I think it's funny you should say that, because a lot of people have missed contact. I haven't hugged my mum, so I'm waiting for hopefully that first week of July. I haven't given her a hug, and I really miss contact. You know me, I'm quite a tactile individual. So socializing and contact are the two things that I miss, and it's been really interesting because everyone has said exactly the same thing. But it's also important to caveat it, and we'll talk a little bit later about one of the good things that's come from this. It's also really good to caveat the fact that you've got this new perspective. Everybody's got new perspective. There's been nobody that's not been able to look at this and just take stuff that they used to take for granted and really appreciate it. Now, human beings are really funny because we're creatures of habit, and our habit has been locked down to I'm hoping that when we come out of this habit of lockdown that we don't lose touch with the really important things. We don't lose touch with no one's cooked as much as they've cooked before. No one's become chefs as they have before. No one's taken as much time in the garden. We've been really fortunate with the weather. People have learnt languages, as you said before. I've started to. Well, my French is terrible, but it's got better. People have learned instruments. People have drawn. People's creative side has come out. People have connected with their immediate families more because they haven't spent so long commuting. So, as I say, we'll talk about it later. But it's really nice that you made that point, not only about yourself and what you've missed, but more importantly about your team and for them to be able to pull a positive from it. In terms of how long do you think, and this is a crystal ball moment, which I won't hold you to, I promise you. How long do you think we're going to be feeling the impact of this from a prediction perspective? It's not the same as the usual. If we're going to call it recession, we're going to have a downturn. We've had a downturn in the economy already, so let's call it recession. It's not a dirty word, but it's not normal factors, not normal economic forces which have created this recession. So there is some talk that it will be a more rapid, even though it's going to be a long road back, it's going to be a more rapid rise. What are your thoughts around what the impact will be and how long that will be, buddy?
Yeah, great question. Great question there, Nick. And I gauge it on the amount of interest that we receive, positive interest, where people are planning and people are considering significant projects compared to how it was in 2008 and just after that. And there isn't there's such a difference in the type of interest that's there. People are wanting to expand, doing things differently, realize they want to expand. I think that is primarily down to because we're all in this across the world, so and media plays a huge part on this. It does frustrate me, the negativity sometimes. But what I'm seeing is that business owners and everyone involved is driving through this. So I think, to answer your question, I'm hoping that it will be based on current trends very quickly. So perhaps a downturn at Christmas in the winter months. But before that, some planning before. So I'm hopefully it'll be a lot quicker. My other concern as well is this money's got to be repaid back at some point, and how that will be. I don't think, not getting too political, I don't think it'll be down to the public purse of the everybody else around the country. I think it will come down to perhaps sort of like corporation tax and businesses as well. I just hope that the powers that be can stretch that out to a certain extent, where all the investment that's been putting into by businesses now isn't short-lived. So to think perhaps things about R&D tax credits and things that you've been working on over the time to make use of any strategies that are available to counter. That's what I think that will come. Oh, but I did hear actually, in Prime Minister's time, question time was talk about business rates being relaxed for 12 months, which
interesting.
Yeah. Well, we'll see about that.
Yeah, well, I share your same degree of trepidation around what it will look like. They've really dug deep. The government have really underpinned the economy and really helped the SME environment prop it up. And in the mainstay, that will be really positive. There are some organisations that it has allowed them to tread water, and it will delay the inevitable. But you have to have one rule for all in terms of trying to give everyone an opportunity to kind of survive this. Yeah. I do hope that it'll be spread out. However they get this money back, however they recoup this back from the economy, I hope that they either drag it over a longer period to allow it not to be a further burden. And I hope there's enough coffers in there that they can do that, so that we can all, because we all want to pay back the assistance we've received from the government. We just want to make sure it's feasible within a timescale. I fully agree, and a lovely answer. The answer changes every single week now, because obviously as we move a little bit further to a new normal, people are a bit more confident in that. And I hope that response there, if that comes good, you know what, we're not going to be in a bad spot in a long term. Great response to that question, by the way, Paul. And you know, I always finish my interviews off with a really poignant question around, you know, what good can come from it. We don't want to dismiss the fact that there's been loss of life. There's been businesses that have gone under. People have lost their roles, and it has been a terrible time for everybody. But there's a gift in everything, and I know that we spoke briefly earlier about, you know, seeing those gifts and taking something and regaining that perspective. What do you think? I'm going to ask you two things. What is a good thing that's come from it from a business perspective in terms of your industry, which I think I know the answer around remote working, and then what is the good thing that you've seen come from it personally?
Yeah, okay. So from a business perspective, I think it's fast-tracked plans that our sector had been adopting and planning for that would happen over the next 3 to 5 years. That's fast-tracked that probably by 24 months. Mm-hmm. Conversations now are occurring, and the technology is available. You just need to help clients understand how to purchase correctly. So it's a good investment at the end of the day, and that takes time and patience. So we're all set up for that side. On a personal side of it, I think it was the recharge that a lot of people perhaps needed. Every days were becoming the same. The weekends were you were planning, and you look back and what have you really achieved. So I think this was the sort of the marker that people think, and I hope people do, I'm going to do things differently this time. And I suppose what I've done is I never used to do it before, but bring, I suppose, that planning from a year to 24 months to 3 months. 3 months. What do we want to get out of the next 3 months? To bring it real, make it more real. So that's the positive side.
Okay. And you know what? I really want to focus on the positive. As you mentioned before, it's not a political show, and the news has an agenda. And I think that we need to, as a nation, to get through this, there needs to be that collective spirit, and it needs to be a positive collective spirit. And us, harboring bad news isn't going to get us out of this. We don't obviously want to paint a rosy, look at things through rose-tinted glass, but we've got to get the benefit from it. So it's everyone's answer has been different. That was a really cool answer. There've been answers around community spirit. There's been answers around buying local. It's been really interesting. Go on. There's a different type of pressure that's been recognised. I have to admit, it's a bit tongue-in-cheek, but typically, you're talking about colleagues and pressures that go on in the boardroom and the rest of it. There's nothing like it. And we've been doing a bit of community help in Worcester. There's nothing like the pressure when your last food care pack of the day is to an 80-year-old that likes to read a few books, and the only books that you've got in the back of your car is something called 50s or 5 Jilly Cooper novels. That's a whole different, fresh social responsibility pressure. Yeah, honestly. I love that. And you know what? Before we sign off, I know you've done some great work with Worcester Community Trust. We're trying to get Philip Fowler on as our guest for Weekly Wellbeing. I think we might get him on this Friday or next Friday. Give him a nudge for me, please. But yeah, that's a really funny one. Isn't it bizarre? Like the stuff that we normally worry about and the stuff that normally takes up a lot of our mind space, our emails, our inbox, our meetings. Actually, this fresh perspective on, have I got a decent novel for this 80-year-old? That's my last drop of the day on the care packages you've been doing, because obviously you've been doing that charity work. What a great way to sign off, bro. What a great way to sign off. Paul Valentine, it's been really weird me calling you Paul Valentine because I normally just call you Valley. Valley, it's been great to have you on the show as usual. Thank you to all the guests. Thanks to Gory and thanks to the guys for checking in. I'm going to sign off today, thanking Nick Baxter here from IsoNation and Baxter Williams, thanking Paul Valentine from Spire Tech Group. Hope to see you all very soon. Stay safe, stay sane, and I'm going to sign off. Cheers, guys. All the best.
See you,
Okay,
mate.
bye-bye.